and he's looking to be more proactive with Thrashing Brontodons and even some District Guides as not only a mana fixer, but an early play.
All right, let's take a look at opening hands here. We're going to be following along with Kanister on the bottom part of our screen. Ooh, double Casualties of War, a 2-lander here. There's a Gilded Goose and a Cauldron Familiar, though. Ooh.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I mean, he is playing a fairly mana-intensive deck. You know, the 2 copies of Casualties of War obviously pretty far off from being cast. However, this is a matchup where Mayhem Devil is extremely powerful. You know, this is, again, a sacrifice mirror match. Mayhem Devil triggers off of either player's sacrifice effects. So having access to that and also having ways to kill your opponents can be very powerful.
Right, well, he snap kept it. And on the other side of the battlefield, it is also a 2-lander with Gilded Goose and a Cauldron Familiar, although he happens to have 2 of them. Miguel's going to kick things off with an untapped Overgrown Tomb and a Cauldron Familiar before passing the turn back. Untapped Forest here, Gilded Goose. You see a little bit of a different approach from our players here. Both of them with similar options on the first turn of the game. Now we're going to see Gilded Goose and a Cauldron Familiar, though, for Miguel. You can see why he chose to play the way he did. 1-drop into 2 1-drops on turn 2 for him. He gets to keep that food in place, where if you look down for Kanister, he's now got the Cauldron Familiar, but he's also got another 1-drop, and it's a Witch's Oven. Not bad. He's got a repeatable food source plus a Cauldron Familiar and a Witch's Oven.
And this, by getting the Witch's Oven out here, for instance, he could have played his Mayhem Devil. And by playing his Mayhem Devil, he would have gotten the 3/3 into play, but he could have ended up just trading that with a Wicked Wolf. Now, if his opponent has Wicked Wolf this turn, he won't be able to kill the Mayhem Devil, and he'll be able to turn whatever is targeted into a food with Witch's Oven. However, he does not have an additional red source if his goose gets killed.
Let's see if that's what happens here. It does seem to be the best target on the battlefield, and sure enough, the Wicked Wolf is hungry for some goose. And unfortunately for Kanister, his only red source is now gone. He's going to need to find one. Finds a swamp off the top of the library, and the window for him to cast Mayhem Devil has closed, at least for the time being.
He does still have those 2 Casualties of War in his hand. He has the Familiar plus Oven, so he's not really under any threat of pressure from this Wicked Wolf. This is actually an interesting spot for Miguel on the top of the screen. He has the Thrashing Brontodon, and he has the mana to either play his Thrashing Brontodon and kill the Oven to prevent the recycling tricks with the Cauldron Familiar, or he can make a food with his Gilded Goose so he can play Korvold next turn. And the Korvold, as we've seen throughout the course of the weekend, can be absolutely backbreaking. This enormous swing card in really any matchup, just so powerful in this deck. So getting that online could be quite powerful, though he doesn't have any way to really take advantage of the additional sacrifice effects right now.
And it looks like Miguel's just going to say go here. That's still going to prompt the cat jumping in the oven, at least temporarily. Another swamp off the top of the library does mean the Kanister is now just 1 more land away from being able to cast Casualties of War, but the Mayhem Devil eludes him. And
this is one of the drawbacks of specifically the Jund Sacrifice deck. It does have a bit awkward mana. In particular against opponents who can target your Gilded Goose. We see both players would be completely without red mana if it were not for Gilded Goose. It's simply the fact that the Goose on Miguel's side has survived that he's able to cast this Korvold.
Kanister threatening the Your Go emote, decided not to fire it off, though. Miguel's going to get in with all 3 of his creatures, but of course the Cauldron Familiar is going to jump back on the battlefield here to jump in front of the Wicked Wolf.
Cook that cat.
It's again sacrificed. This is a familiar pattern if you've played a lot of Standard recently. Really, the Trail of Crumbs.
Familiar pattern, I get it.
And the Witch's Oven have really become a staple in Standard.
Interesting. He chooses to go ahead and kill the oven this turn, whereas he did not do it last turn. That's a Blood Crypt.
Hello,
That's
perfect
a
draw.
Mayhem Devil.
Wow, I was thinking Blood Crypt would be the perfect draw for him here because it lets him slot in Mayhem Devil in between the now 2 copies of Casualties of War that'll come down over the course of the next 2 turns.
And interestingly, if he so chooses, he can kill the Gilded Goose. And that would keep Miguel off of the ability to actually cast Corvold. He can return Cauldron Familiar, sacrificing a food, then pay mana to sacrifice another food, and kill the Gilded Goose and keep Miguel off of red. And I think that's what he's going to do.
You know, he's probably also thinking about Casualties of War, right? Just another land means that Casualties would be online. And as it turns out, Miguel has both of those in his hand, Corvold and Casualties. So heads up play here from Kanister, trying to limit the mana output for Miguel, both in terms of amount and color.
It also removes his food source.
And look at that, a Fabled Passage off the top here for Miguel.
Well, that is enough to enable the Corvold, but Corvold against an opposing Mayhem Devil can be a little awkward.
It can be awkward, and then of course the Casualties of War ×2 are going to start hitting the battlefield for Kanister. You got to like his position here. That Blood Crypt was critical. We've talked also about Mayhem Devil being kind of the mirror breaker, right? Fabled Passage triggers it, so does Corvold. Food, Cauldron Familiar, it all does.
And the big issue here too is if Miguel chooses to play the Corvold here, he does lose one of these Cauldron Familiars to this Mayhem Devil trigger, thanks to just the Fabled Passage sacrifice.
Yes.
And then the other to the Corvold coming in and the trigger from the Corvold. Then Casualties of War comes down. He actually loses. He's going to end up.
One here.
Right. Yeah. So he's actually not going to lose it because he does end up using it with the sacrifice effect of the Corvold itself. So.
Well, it's a damage.
Right. But now the Casualties of War from Kanister can take out that red source or the black source. I imagine actually the black source to keep him further off from Casualties of War.
Yes. And it can even eat up the food to potentially leave the Wicked Wolf vulnerable next turn. Now, we see that there's a Gilded Goose in hand for Miguel, so he probably could be able to stem that. But as it stands, this looks great for Kanister.
Oh, yeah, it's fantastic.
Casualties of War, your food, your Corvold, and now
initially it was like, okay, red, but wait.
Yeah.
You actually also only have one black.
So funny to see him go through the same thought process that you just went through. And let's see what he did. He went for the black one as well. It does seem much better when you think about it. So in response, Miguel can sacrifice the food to bring back a Cauldron Familiar, at least get a little bit of value, but once again, the Mayhem Devil will trigger again. And it just sort of adds up, or at least offsets the Cauldron Familiar.
Well, one of the keys is you do get the sacrifice trigger, which draws you a card with Corvold.
True. And he found Trail of Crumbs. There's a black source off the top of the library, and critically, the Gilded Goose or Trail of Crumbs, or Trail of Crumbs, giving the Wicked Wolf something to eat means that the Casualties of War will have a hard time killing it.
But you're also just giving more targets for the second Casualties of War.
Yeah.
If you play Swamp Trail of Crumbs here, it's just so sad because you're going to lose your black source, and your Trail of Crumbs is an enchantment.
That made my stomach hurt when you said that. Let's see what he does. He's going to get in with Wicked Wolf. Interesting. He's actually decided against it. Kanister.
Classic Kanister.
Looks like Miguel decided against any type of attack, but there we go. The Trail of Crumbs and the Gilded Goose hit the battlefield, and there are targets galore for this Casualties of War.
War
Lots
is hell.
of casualties.
I mean, this is brutal.
This is nasty stuff.
Taking out I imagine the targets will be Gilded Goose, Trail of Crumbs, Swamp again, and another food. Because that ends up keeping your opponent, again, totally off black mana. And we're seeing just the snowball effect of the Casualties of War. The first one, obviously, a powerful swing. and keeping Miguel off of his copy of Casualties of War. The second one keeping him even further from that Casualties of War. And yeah, we see, oh dear.
Miguel's like, another one? Come on, man.
Can sacrifice the food to the Cauldron Familiar to get a dig with the Trail of Crumbs. No more Corvold draw, though.
Right. Still, Trail of Crumbs, very powerful, able to potentially replace itself here with something. He's deciding if he wants to target Cauldron Familiar or just go upstairs to Miguel once again with his Mayhem Devil trigger.
Get you.
It's going to be upstairs.
Yep, she's into pay for the trail.
And what did he find?
Found a Corvold, but
no black mana.
No black mana for the next turn when he to pull that off.
Swamp would be nice.
Yep.
By the way, this deck, very difficult to play. Lots of small interactions and small incremental gains to be had. If you can understand the fundamentals of them, you can really get ahead with a deck like this, but there's a lot to miss as well.
Right.
Witch's Oven.
Oven and the wolf are nice, but he has no food. I think he's just going to trade Wicked Wolf for Mayhem Devil at this point, though.
Just finally get that thing off the battlefield. 4-mana sorcery. Get rid of your Mayhem Devil and attack with everything.
Yeah, I mean, this is an opportunity to get some damage in.
Are we just going to see Massacre Girl?
Yeah, I suspect that Massacre Girl will come down next turn for Kanister.
Yeah, even with the chump block, the Massacre Girl still enough with the double Cauldron Familiar to get rid of the Wicked Wolf. Oh, Corvold to follow up as well.
Now we see it literally just rubbing his hands together like
he's like, mwah.
Like some sort of anime villain. Yes, you are falling into my master plan, my trap.
Oh, he's going to play Gilded Goose. So I guess we're going to see Corvold here.
Yeah, it's going to be Corvold.
He's like, that's just better. You can have a Wicked Wolf. Let's get a bunch of cards. Remember, he gets to do this again thanks to Cauldron Familiar.
And yeah, he's actually, with the sacrifice trigger on the stack for Corvold, he sacrifices the food to get the Cauldron Familiar, to get that little bit of drain trigger, to get it again when he sacrifices it again and brings it back again.
Yeah, that was effectively 3 cards there from Corvold.
It's a pretty powerful fellow.
Right, he's going to end up with a 7/7 flyer.
And drew 3 cards.
And 3 cards in hand for 5 mana. That's a Brawl card, by the way.
Yeah, yeah.
Like,
I mean,
talk about crossing over to another format. Double Beanstalk Giant in hand now as well for Kanister. Card we haven't seen much of in Standard since the banning of Field of the Dead. And even then, not the most popular, but you do see it now, especially in conjunction with Lucky Clover.
I mean, this is, again, one of the situations where you're like, oh, is he dead? Can he kill him? And
I'm just going to say, yeah, sure.
Typically, it's not a bad assumption. I mean, he does have, so Kanister does have Trail of Crumbs. I don't think that there's like a combination without like an oven here to actually end the game on the spot.
By the way, Kanister, going back to that, you noticed the mountain looked like the obvious target for the first Casualties of War. It ended up being the Overgrown Tomb that was better. And that follow-through from making that play plus blowing up the other black mana source has been devastating. Look at Miguel's hand.
That Casualties of War has been in hand for so long. He had the Casualties of War in hand while Kanister had those Casualties of Wars in hand. That kept him off of the double black mana for so long. And just the massive swing of those casualties has really left Kanister very much in the driver's seat here.
And now there's 3 black cards stuck in hand for Miguel. Ooh.
Oh, dear.
Turbo mode engage.
We don't have quite the complete combo. I only just noticed that he's playing with the pony sleeve.
Yeah, he is.
I only just noticed that.
Actually, both of them with very distinct sleeve choices. The scenic there from Miguel, really beautiful. And then the kind of hit you over the head.
Crunch.
Pony sleeves. Wow. Fabled Passage would have been good for another point of damage, but he drew it during combat there.
Does he just have the second the second familiar plus Witch's Oven?
I don't know. I called it earlier and said I assumed that he has lethal.
Well, he had a bunch more. Oh, there's the opposing familiars too that do complicate things as well.
Yeah, to say it's complicated is an understatement.
And still
There's
no
a Fabled Passage. That should be good for black mana, but it just feels like it's way
just not
too
enough
late at this point. Kanister's line of keeping his opponent off of black mana.
And really, this is a hope of chump blocking with Corvold.
Yes.
That's
the dream.
That's all you can really hope to do here, and then hope that you draw a black mana and can cast your Casualties of War next turn. But we see that there's Murderous Rider waiting in the hand for Kanister to ensure that his Corvold is the one true Fakehurst King.
That's right. So this one's going to go to Piotr Głogowski. And really, he was the first one to start to get to resolve the big stuff. And then once he found Corvold, even though he had a decent-looking Massacre Girl play lined up, he's like, oh, never mind,
yep.
Corvold. And Corvold does what Corvold does in this deck. It is completely overpowered in a sacrifice-themed deck. And you can see why some of these players have stretched their mana base into red for that card as well as the Mayhem Devil.
It has been incredible every time we've seen it in play over the course of the weekend so far. But speaking of incredible, incredibly, that was one of the first game losses that Miguel has taken this entire tournament. He was the single remaining player who had not lost a match yet in this tournament. He advanced with 5 wins straight out yesterday, won his first match today, and I believe in the course of his matches yesterday lost a game. So he is in a spot he's been unfamiliar with so far this tournament, down a game. Worth noting, of course, that the records did reset between yesterday and today, so despite that 5-0 record yesterday, he is on the same footing as the other players entering into today.
Does this deck have bad mana?
Yes.
Okay.
It has at best mediocre mana, and it does rely very heavily on Gilded Goose, as we both were discussing and saw in the first game. You know, when the Gilded Gooses died, it left each player struggling to find their mana, and then a Casualties of War really sort of set everything off.
It's interesting to see how that plays out, where you take a consistency hit, but the power level boost is so huge, as we saw in this last match.
I wouldn't say it's really bad. I mean, there's definitely decks like, you know, the 5-color Fires decks that, you know, their mana is a lot worse. Yeah, but I mean, frankly, even 2-color decks in this format can sometimes struggle to get their mana on time, at least. And this deck does frequently want to curve out and play things like the Mayhem Devil early, and it can be tough to play something you're splashing off of not that many sources in the first few turns of the game.
So we do see Gilded Goose here to kick things off in game number 2 for Miguel. And he's got the Witch's Oven as well. His hand is kind of interesting after that. A pair of Thrashing Brontodons and a Mayhem Devil, though it does look like, at least on this turn, Kanister is going to give one of those Thrashing Brontodons a potential target here, a Trail of Crumbs.
Yeah. And I do want to say, with regard to the mana in the deck, both these players actually have mana fixing that many other competitors did not. District Guide and Beanstalk Giant are included in both of these decks, or rather one in each of them. And a lot of the other players chose to just play non-basic lands and Fable Passages. And we didn't see many of these Jund Sacrifice decks make day 2, but I don't think it's a coincidence that the ones that have that additional mana fixing are the ones that did make it through.
Mayhem Devil hits the battlefield first for Miguel as he passes the turn back to Kanister, who now has options of his own. He actually has similar options to what Miguel had. He can play a Thrashing Brontodon or a Mayhem Devil. He also now has an option on a Witch's Oven, though. I can't imagine that he'd want to only spend 1 mana this turn. So Mayhem Devil's going to go on the stack.
Yep. And
Mayhem Devil here, but
Mayhem Devil versus Mayhem Devil is a little weird because both, you know, each player needs to be very judicious about how they choose to use their sacrifice effects, but also because the priority of whose goes off when can be important, especially when the life totals get low. the way that the priority works is that the non-active player's things resolve first. So if a player sacrifices a thing, the player whose turn it is not gets the ping resolving first. So if both players at 1 life, you want to sacrifice a thing on your opponent's turn, so your ping goes off and resolves first.
That's right. Remember, both of the Mayhem Devils will trigger off of any sacrifice from either player. And that's why you have to track that sort of thing so carefully. Now, with both players at high life totals, that won't be quite as relevant yet. But it's something that they're going to have to consider going forward, and it's another wrinkle that makes this deck quite difficult to play overall. A duress from Miguel only has 1 target, but he'll be glad to get it. Takes the Witch's Oven, and now he gets to see what's up in the hand of his opponent as well, which is, you know, the hidden mode on duress, right? You get to still see what's going on.
It does make the Brontodons in his hand feel a little bit worse because, well, you just took the at least one of the targets, but there are many, many more.
Interestingly, Miguel's going to offer the trade for the Mayhem Devil, and Kanister's going to take it. They don't want to do that math either. Just going to just get him off the battlefield.
I mean, part of it is that there's no clear indication of who has kind of the advantage with the Mayhem Devil situation.
Yeah, if I had to guess, I would say that it was Kanister slightly, just because there's a Gilded Goose that could die pretty easily.
And that Fabled Passage is a very good draw for Kanister here. Both players definitely looking for mana right now. We see Miguel has that Casualty of War in hand, but stuck on 3 land. And we saw last game, how important it can be to be the player who casts that card first, because
that's right.
With the relatively delicate mana base of this deck, can mean that you just never cast it.
Kanister looks like he's decided that his turn is going to be sacrifice the food the good old-fashioned way and pay for Trail of Crumbs to start digging, rather than playing an untapped land into Thrashing Brontodon with activation for the Witch's Oven. He doesn't really worry about it that much at this point. So he feels like he can take a turn off. He's not facing down any pressure whatsoever and start digging around with Trail of Crumbs.
Trail, hugely powerful right now for Kanister. Talking about how important that resource advantage is, getting to those big spells. Trail gives you a much stronger chance of hitting your mana drops, and does just leave Kanister in a situation where he has a clear advantage if this game goes long right now because of that Trail.
He found a Gilded Goose off the trail, and he can cast both of these.
He can actually, he could cast the Mayhem Devil.
God, if I was Miguel, I would be spamming your go so hard right now. As we see the rope appear here for Kanister, he's got a tough decision. Looks like he is going to go for Mayhem Devil. He has the Fabled Passage there, as well as a Gilded Goose.
It cares more about preserving the herd's territory than preserving itself. That's the flavor text of Thrashing Brontodon.
I was going to say, what are we?
Which we just saw because he just kept clicking on it on the board there.
Thrashing Brontodon, one of my favorite artwork from that set. It's just like basically walking through a pirate ship. It seems unaware of it.
What's going on, huh?
Yeah. Hey, guys. I want to go in the boat. All right, so Gilded Goose hits the battlefield. Mayhem Devil as well. There's a Fabled Passage at the ready, but it can't actually kill anything at the moment, so he's going to leave it up.
And a Goose picked up for Miguel. We're going to learn the flavor text of a lot of these cards, I think.
Yeah, I think you're right.
The wafting spells are both scrumptious and suspicious.
That's pretty good.
It's Witch's Oven, yeah. I mean, I would think the cat smells pretty suspicious.
Yes. All right, Thrashy B hits the battlefield for Miguel, but he's starting to fall woefully behind on mana here. He's kind of clinging to this Gilded Goose. Oh, no.
Yeah, there's
Corvold Faker's King is going to hit the battlefield, and that is going to kill the Gilded Goose.
The combination of Corvold plus this Mayhem Devil is true mayhem.
We're going to see Fabled Passage get sacrificed. That's going to put 1 damage on the Gilded Goose off of the Mayhem Devil, and then Corvold's going to hit the battlefield. I heard you like dragons, Brian.
little raise the eyebrows for Miguel. Like, ooh, no.
Yeah, this one's falling apart for him very
not what
quickly.
I wanted to see.
Yeah, all of a sudden, Piotr Głogowski, over the course of the last 2 turns, in a turn sequence where Miguel played a Thrashing Brontodon with no targets and said go, Kanister set up Mayhem Devil plus Corvold. Like, we are playing on different levels at this point,
Right.
and a lot of it's due to the mana woes here from Miguel da Cruz Simões. He is done. I mean, can he even come back from this point?
I don't think so. And the big thing, like you mentioned, is the mana situation. He has the 2 Casualties of War in hand. This isn't a game where Kanister has killed his land with his own Casualties of War. This is just a game where he's lost Gilded Goose. And you know, he has just not drawn that many lands. He has not drawn his district guides. He's not really found enough resources to work with these big Haymaker spells. And I don't really see a way out of this, especially as that Witch's Oven also comes down to give even further sacrifice tricks to Kanister.
Murderous Rider in hand too, so if he wanted, he could pick off either of the creatures. So it looks like Kanister's maybe considering making a food with Gilded Goose, attacking with Corvold, sacrificing something. Oh, he didn't get the... Ooh, that's a bummer. So what he wanted to do was make a food with Gilded Goose and sacrifice the food, but he missed the window. It looked like maybe he didn't put a stop or something. You saw a little head shake from him because he's like, I wanted to respond to that trigger.
Yeah, and I mean, he could have just done it beforehand.
Which he looked like he wanted to do,
Right.
but then just didn't. Kind of awkward. So he ended up having to sacrifice a land there. It doesn't look likely to punish him here, that little misstep, though. But it certainly wasn't what he planned. In the meantime, Gilded Goose has already taken 1 from the mountain getting sacrificed, and now another from the food. And this is going to be 6 damage, and really the death knell here for Miguel, who's down to 2 copies of Casualties of War with 3 mana on the battlefield. Yeah, he can't even do the plan of like sacrifice a bunch of food to try to survive. He just doesn't have the mana. And that's really been the story from his perspective. We've been following along with Kanister, and he's had a lot of interesting decisions. But unfortunately for Miguel, that has not been the case, and he's going to have to scoop it up. That is Kanister, Piotr Głogowski, picking up the win here in round number 2. Congratulations to him. Got his day off to a good start, and he's 2-0.
Yeah, and you know, we saw why players chose to bring this Jund Sacrifice deck. It is a deck that can clearly do very powerful things. But we also saw kind of why it didn't necessarily perform as well as, you know, we on the other side of the board, Miguel really struggled to get his mana situation situated and had a really difficult time actually playing his spells.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because the players, they kind of highlighted the things that you and I had talked about, Kibler, which was the mana